Welcome back to Brown's podcast. I'm your host, Janelle Brown. Co-host Jim Brown is MIA as usual. So I have my very good friend here, Casey, and we're going to talk a little bit about some PT because we're so bad at it. When we get injured, we decide, it'll grow back. It'll be fine.
Yeah. Powerlifters are notorious for, getting an injury and then deciding, I can just work through it.
Well, yeah. Right? Isn't that what we're supposed to do?
This is, to a certain extent, yes, but we will talk about that.
So tell us a little bit about yourself and how you actually got involved with, PT.
Yeah. So I was an athlete growing up. So it didn't come without its share of injuries. So I had to experience PT when I was a kid, and I thought this was the best career for me to still be involved in athletics, work with athletes, and get to be on the more medical side of things. Mm-hmm. So I really enjoyed that. And as I got further into my education, I realized physical therapy offers a lot more opportunity than just working with athletes. So,
did you know even before you went into college that was what you wanted to do, or?
To a certain extent,
yeah.
I knew I wanted to be involved somehow with athletics in general, whether it be coaching, training, being an athletic trainer on the sidelines of like sporting events, or on the rehab side like I am now. So yeah, I always knew I wanted to be on in the medical side around athletes in general.
What sport did you play when you were in school?
I did gymnastics, softball, diving, karate. So I did a lot.
I didn't know about softball or karate.
Yeah, well, so that was when I was young, but I followed through with diving through my college career too.
Okay.
So diving mainly, and then after I graduated, I had the whole, well, now what do I compete for? So then I got into the weight room.
And you weren't in the weight room while you were diving? Was that something
A little bit. We did have strength and conditioning sessions, and we had a strength and conditioning coach. And I really did enjoy lifting weights with that. But during the season, not so much, because they didn't want to overload us. It was more plyometric based.
Gotcha.
During the season, and then outside of the season, it was more strength based.
Did you do gymnastics along with diving, or was that something you're like, okay, gymnastics, I've had enough, and now into diving? Like, how did you get into diving?
Yeah, so gymnastics, there was very little overlap between gymnastics and diving. I stopped gymnastics when I was really young, mainly because my parents saw the writing on the wall. It got to a point where the coaches were pushing for me to either homeschool and make gymnastics my life.
Yeah.
Or they wanted me to experience going to high school, making friends, having a life outside of the gymnastics gym. So they wanted me to transition out of it. And one summer I hopped on a diving board and started doing flips and twists.
Because you already knew how to do that.
Exactly, yeah. So
and when you were going to hit water, that's not going to hurt.
Right, yeah, exactly. So the coach was like, you want to dive? And I'm like, sure.
So then that's when you started diving.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So how far in, so you did diving throughout your collegiate career.
Mm-hmm.
And is there anywhere to go after that with diving? Once you...
Yeah, so at the time I didn't realize it. I thought once you were done, you were done.
Yeah, that's what I would have thought.
Yeah, so no, you can do club diving, and there are avenues to continue training and, get on a national stage and regional stage and things like that. But also as a college athlete who really didn't have a job either, or paid very little to, for the necessities. Right. I didn't really have enough to pay for a club membership either.
Gotcha, okay.
So yeah, after diving, I was just kind of done and I didn't know what to do. So then the weight room was there.
The weight room.
Yeah.
So how did you go from diving to the weight room to currently what you're doing now in powerlifting?
Yeah, well, one, because I had so much time on my hands and I didn't know what to do, and I was used to doing 2-a-day practices.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we used to get up in the morning, do conditioning, and then the afternoons or during the day would be our skills practice in the pool. So I was already used to doing that. I mean, for about a month, I was like, oh, this is nice. I can sleep in. But then after a while, I was like, I'm bored.
Right.
And the fitness center was open. So I'm like, you know what? I still want to train. I want to see where I can push myself. And being, I guess, in a swimsuit too, I was like, bodybuilding. so, and plus I actually really enjoyed being the only female in the weight section of the fitness center.
Absolutely.
I loved it. That was my favorite aspect. I used to love to go in there and like see if I can outlift the boys. Now I had no programming, no coach, no anything. I was just like, I'm gonna outlift you.
And you just did it just to prove that you could.
Yeah, just to prove that I could.
And I know from experience with you, by the time we met, you already had a huge bench. You know, for your size, like, you know, with no coach and no programming. How did that? Do you think diving and gymnastics had something to do with that?
I don't know. I don't know where that came in, honestly. I don't. I just liked it. I'm just
gonna lay on the. I'm just gonna lay on the benches and, you know, do what they're doing.
Yeah,
basically.
I'm just gonna start chest pressing. So, I mean, this may be part of the reason though why my squat and deadlift aren't where they need to be, because I was like, oh, well, I can do a bunch of upper body stuff.
Right.
And like I had never really. I mean, we were squatting a little bit during training. But our diving coach didn't want us to overdo that because there was that misconception of they're going to put on too much weight, they're going to look bulky, they're not going to be able to move, you know, or be agile in the pool.
Gotcha.
So
you'd be making bigger splashes. Or
yeah, I don't know. I mean, we would go on maybe having the strength to, you know, rip through the water and going on our head helped with the upper body stuff.
Right.
But otherwise, no, I don't know where the bench came from, but I'll gladly take it.
So what is we talked about your career with diving and I think the transition to coming out of that and not having anything to do, you know, gravitated to weight training.
Mm-hmm.
And was it your first? Well, you didn't really know about powerlifting first, so you were just your focus was bodybuilding.
Yeah.
And then we met.
Yep.
And the first time I met you, I don't even know how it even came across. I don't know if you asked me or I just looked at you. I'm like, I think you were thinking of it, and I'm like, figure.
Yes.
100% figure.
Yeah. So that bodybuilding, maybe stepping on stage, was always in the back of my mind, because I also, going through grad school in physical therapy, had a couple friends that did it. And I'm like, oh, well, that's another sport that I can work, you know, towards or work into. Because I already like going to the gym. I like working out.
You obviously didn't have a problem being in a bathing suit.
No. Yeah, no, because I spent my entire life in one, or a leotard or something like that. So, and then when my husband got the job at Scranton, we started training here. And so he started with the powerlifting, which I was like, that's your thing.
Did you not?
Sorry, babe.
Oops. Did you not did you know anything about, I know when I met Jim, I never heard of powerlifting. I was like, what is this sport? It sounds a little ridiculous.
Yeah, no, I knew nothing about bodybuilding other than in my head the crazy diets that everyone talks about, and the amount of time that you dedicate to being in the gym, especially with doing 2-a-days.
Right.
So I had a little bit of knowledge about it, but otherwise, I mean, as far as how to go about it or how to get into it, absolutely not.
Do you think going through that training for bodybuilding and in your field of being a physical therapist, you could probably relate on how some of these injuries are happening and now how to fix them,
Mm-hmm.
you know, how to help people get through that. So what was one thing that you could look back on and be like, okay, this happened to me. This is an injury that I sustained because of, you know, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, you were able to see it for yourself, and you will actually go get help, unlike other people.
Right. Well, being in PT, I know, I know that line of when to, when I can kind of work through things, or what's just maybe a minor ache or pain if I need to tweak something here, tweak something there, and then, or if I need to go seek help
right.
From one of my colleagues. So bodybuilding helped a lot. It helped me understand that volume management is a big aspect in your weight training routine. Making sure that you are taking into account your adequate nutrition, your sleep, because from experience with going through all of that, I had a lot more aches and pains. I had more sick days actually from work because of how much you're dedicating, and you're in for the most part, a caloric deficit.
Right.
So your body's not recovering well. So from that aspect, I learned a lot about myself in how to manage the sleep, the nutrition, the training, and therefore impart some of that knowledge onto the patients that were appropriate.
Right.
So,
and how do you relate that to going farther into powerlifting? Do you feel like you've had more, not injuries, but you were susceptible to more injuries from powerlifting than bodybuilding, do you think?
Yeah, so I think it was a few years ago, I saw there was a research study that bodybuilders statistically have lower rates of injuries than powerlifters or Olympic lifters or other types of athletes in general.
Do you think that's because of the blood flow? The volume of the...
I'm wondering if it's because of incorporating various movement patterns into training, and while you are loading, you're not loading like 105%. You're not
right.
working up to that peak with
right.
it. So I think bodybuilders have a more variable training program. So it allows them to adjust movement patterns or learn to move in different ways that powerlifters don't typically do. You think about it, we're very up and down, we're very linear.
Right.
There's not a lot of rotational stuff. There's not a lot of accessory kind of movements.
Right.
Whereas bodybuilding incorporates, while it does combine combination movements or compound lifts, you're doing a lot more accessory or like focused, isolated stuff.
Right.
Whereas powerlifting, it's almost all compound.
And it's most of the time under heavy load.
Exactly.
Yeah, and a lot of times you get through and I know for me, and most likely for you, you do your main movements,
mm-hmm.
and you're exhausted,
yeah.
and you really don't want to do all that accessory work.
Right.
And a lot of people will be like, oh, I'm good. I got my main movements in. I don't need to do this other stuff.
Yeah, no, do your accessories.
Yeah. Because that's more functional as well.
Right. Yeah. And that's also what I liked about powerlifting though too, is that it has, to me, it had a lot more functional carryover to a certain extent, and teaching some of my patients in relation to their daily activities, why they need to be deadlifting, why they need to be, squatting, why they need to be doing chest presses in rows and things like that.
Right.
So yeah, granted, powerlifters do need a lot more mobility and accessory work, I think, incorporated into things.
Yeah, I'm guilty of not warming up the way I should. I'm getting better.
That's good.
I'm getting better. Upper body, I'm getting better. Shoulders, warm-ups. But lower body, yeah, I'm like, oh, the bar. I'm squatting the bar. That's my warm-up. Well, I know it's wrong. I just do it anyway.
And therein lies the problem.
So, all right, for say it's squat day.
Yeah.
And I think what we'll do is, we're going to talk about it, but we'll have links to some of the different exercises that you can do that Casey will show us. So you have something to refer back on. And so you actually have a reliable warm up for,
mm-hmm.
your workouts.
Sounds
so
good.
what is, what's something that we want to make sure of that we warm up for before we squat, before we get under those heavy loads?
So one of my go-tos for, let's say it's a squat day, I mean, you still want to make sure that your core is engaged, that you're stable in that aspect, because you can't shoot a cannonball from a rowboat.
Whoa.
So that's a saying that I tell a lot of patients too. Like, if your core is weak or not engaged,
right,
everything else there's a lot more stress on other areas.
Okay.
So making sure that you're doing, I'm not saying do a full ab workout before you lift, but warm up the core. I usually like to do, we call them dying bugs or dead bugs or bird dogs. That's great because that's also an anti-rotation movement. So a lot of times when powerlifters especially somehow move out of that normal linear plane of movement, whether it be rotation or muscular imbalances, that's where injuries tend to occur, because again, we're so used to going in a vertical, or non, rotational kind of movement pattern.
Right.
So I do like to incorporate some anti-rotation activities like the dying bugs or like the bird dogs. I also like to incorporate some things like single leg bridges or 90, like hip 90-90 rotations.
Okay.
So just to, again, make sure that we have the flexibility or the movement within various ranges, but then after you gain the mobility in those ranges, doing some stabilization exercises like clamshells, like side steps, to make sure that your muscles know how to engage in those newfound ranges.
Now, do you go right into doing that, or should you have some kind of dynamic warm up first, or, because there's always a little bit of a misconception of whether you can just stretch warm up before doing something dynamic.
Right. So I usually incorporate a light aerobic kind of warm up just to get the blood flowing. So I usually recommend doing like a 5 to 10 minute, light, like bike or treadmill, walk, something just to get the muscles going. You never want to stretch cold.
Right.
Because that can lead to tendinous injuries, strains in the muscles, things like that. That increased blood flow to the area can help loosen that up or prep even the neuromuscular system for movement.
Okay. Wow. She's using some big words on us today. And okay, so we're good with that. We'll, link some stuff there. What about, I think from what I see, and it's not just powerlifters and bodybuilders, it's the average Joe that it has these shoulder injuries. Mm-hmm. They come in and they're benching and they're doing shoulder presses, and I don't see them. They'll warm up, but it's so half-ass that they're like do, and they're not giving it the full attention. Mm-hmm. So how would you go about warming up for shoulders or chest day?
So for that, I actually like to incorporate some neck and even some mid-spine or thoracic spine mobility interventions, because we often spend so much time like this throughout the day, whether it be computers, phones, desk work. Yeah. And if you don't have the proper thoracic mobility, that can lead to impingement at the shoulders, especially when going overhead. So when you look at it, if you're here, this is about as high as you can lift your shoulder. Like, other than that, that's as high as I can go without muscling through it. But if you're upright and get some thoracic extension, you get an extra, 20 to 30 degrees sometimes. Right. So the thoracic spine is important in mobilizing or warming up those muscles that attach to that area, like your rhomboids, because all of that helps to stabilize or provide adequate motion for the shoulder, to reduce impingement. But I also like to incorporate not just exercises down here. Like, we see a lot of people doing this external rotation.
And with the bands, with the plate, yes.
Yeah, which they're fine. Don't get me wrong. They're good for the right person. But if you're lifting overhead, if you're here, you're going to be strong here. You're going to warm up your muscles here. But what's going to happen when you're up here?
Gotcha.
So
it's not enough. It's not adequate.
Yeah. So most of the time it's not necessarily adequate, or we're strong in certain planes, but not in others. So if you're planning on doing an overhead movement, I recommend doing a warm-up activity such as like a very light shoulder flexion, or like incline I's, T's, and Y's, just body weight, so that your shoulder is prepped for that overhead activity.
So especially for Olympic style lifters, those the snatch and the clean and jerk, you see a lot of that overhead movement. Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I never thought about thoracic part of the shoulders. I always thought just, make sure we're getting, all around that AC joint and, take care of that.
Yeah. So you have, there's a lot of muscles that attach to the shoulder, but your rhomboids, your upper traps, levator scap, even your lats help stabilize. So all of those have connections to the spine itself. So if there's a weakness somewhere, and I'm not saying it's directly coming from the spine, this is, depends on the person. I would have to evaluate somebody to see really what's going on.
Right.
But all those muscles attach from the shoulder blade, like to the spine, or from the shoulder blade out into like the head of the humerus, in those areas. So if we're only warming up the muscles that attach from here to here,
right,
it's not going to be adequate. You need to warm up the muscles that attach from, to the spine as well, or more central areas.
Gotcha. Wow. Well, we're learning so much today. And I'm learning that I need to do a little bit more shoulder exercises. And I think we've talked about that before, because you gave me a bunch, and I still do them. I do them.
I like the immediate panic that
yes.
I do them.
I absolutely do them.
Good.
So let's talk about, I wrote a couple things down because I wanted to touch on some things that, how do you know when you can work through pain or discomfort? Like, how do you know, okay, I can still muscle through, like, because we know, like, okay, this is burning, like, I got some blood flow, like, I've got that pump. But how do you know the difference between when it's pain that you need to lay off and see somebody, or if you can, like, lay off and, like, take a day or two off?
Yeah. So, one, it's going to depend on like the mechanism of injury. So if there's a sudden sharp kind of pain that occurs when you're lifting, and it lingers for a little bit, I recommend either backing down after that. Generally, again, this is not like a very specific case, so it depends on the person. Just throwing that out there. But if you, I usually tell people, if it lingers, and you're starting to compensate in other ways, if you're starting to use other muscles, or minor adjustments during the movements aren't fixing or helping the situation, then I would say sooner rather than later, get it checked out. Because oftentimes I also see people that they're 3 months into an injury,
right,
and they've developed other movement patterns, compensatory patterns that are potentially detrimental to other areas of the body.
Yes.
So if you feel like you have to compensate to like muscle through things, then I wouldn't continue to work through it. So if you compensations are the big thing that I look for. Okay. So on a shoulder press, for example, you're going overhead, you feel sharp pain there, and each rep you do it, it's continually there. Over the next couple sets, if you feel like you're having to lean or you're having to throw it up, use the momentum to lift overhead, I recommend stopping or backing down the weight. If that reduction in weight doesn't change anything,
right,
then potentially, seek assistance with that.
Are there things that you can do at home instead of having to go to the doctor? Like, if you say, we'll take the shoulder for instance, do you take a Tylenol and do some of your own rehab, or do you be like, hey doc, I got a situation and I don't know how I did it? I think that's part of the problem. Yes, I agree.
So as far as medications go, they're actually out of the scope of PT's practice to recommend or to adjust or anything like that. So I can't necessarily comment on that specifically. But But this is where actually a lot of my colleagues and I were pushing for direct access in physical therapy so that you don't have to go through a doc to see us.
Yeah.
So
get a referral to see it. Yes.
Exactly. Because that deters a lot of people from coming to PT too.
Absolutely.
Since, it might take a month for them to get in with an orthopedic doc and then maybe another, couple weeks until they see a PT.
Right.
So, this is where I'm going to throw my PT advocacy hat on and say, we need direct access. That's one of the downfalls, I think, of medicine.
I agree.
But in that, to answer your question, you can find some really good resources for mobility exercises, for some general rehab exercises. It's all going to depend on your situation, though.
Right.
So, if you find that you're weak in certain areas or you're lacking mobility, I usually say address the low-hanging fruit first. If you're lacking motion, work on the motion aspect of it. If you're lacking motion because you're weak, there may be a strength component to it, so work on the strength aspect in whatever plane you're weak in.
Gotcha.
So I don't have a specific, I guess, reference or a specific page for someone to follow.
Right.
In some cases, Dr. Google can be helpful, but I don't.
Yeah. But you don't recommend it.
No, I don't recommend that all the time because everyone's situation is a little different.
Right.
So usually I would say reduce the volume. So volume management's a big aspect of it too, because some people might just be injured because they're overdoing something.
Right. Like a tennis elbow.
Yeah. So like that tendonitis, if they're using it a lot with certain things and it's being aggravated because now you're adding more onto it, back down the volume, back down the weight. I'm not saying stop activity because that's one thing that I am really against is the whole rest and just rest until it goes away.
Because it's not going to.
Right. For certain people.
Right.
Once again, throwing this out there for certain people.
But that was always the thing. Oh, you got to lay off, give it time. And
right.
But that's
it's not going to fix the mechanical problem that's going on. So along the lines of those medications, yes, they might help. And they may be a temporary fix, but if it's a mechanical issue, it's not going to fix that.
Right.
So, let's say you did rest for, 2 weeks or so, and it's starting to feel better. So you're like, okay, I can go back into the gym. Let's try it again, potentially at a lighter weight and that pain is still there. It may not be necessarily an inflammatory issue. There's inflammation, but if it's a movement problem, the way that there's a certain muscle in the rotator cuff that's not activating when it should,
right.
Or for people with back pain, if they are not engaging the way that they're supposed to, medications to a certain extent are not going to fix that mechanical problem.
I see a lot of back issues with any weight training. Mm-hmm. And I think some people feel like, well, I'll put the belt on earlier and that'll solve that issue.
Yeah, that's a Band-Aid. So, for the most part, that's a Band-Aid. So I actually, the employer that I work for, I actually gave a continuing education course talk on rehabbing weightlifters in general. And there's actually not a lot of research on powerlifters in general, which...
Because there's never anything wrong with us.
Yeah, because we just pushed through all of it.
Right.
But there was a suggestion in one of the research studies that belts should only be used at 80 to 85% and above. At that point, for a newer lifter in particular, it's actually better for them to learn to engage their core first, rather than using a belt to do it for them. Because then when you take that belt off, they haven't developed that strength, stability, or stiffness through the core to help them with the other lifts. So, yeah, I don't usually recommend, you can use a belt, yes. But as far as in relation to an injury, it can be a Band-Aid.
Right.
So my recommendation, see a PT knows what they're talking about in relation to lifting and loading.
And that is difficult to find, are PTs that really understand what we do.
Mm-hmm.
And not just powerlifters, but bodybuilders, and just in the weight room generally,
Mm-hmm.
because you go in there and it's almost a geriatric way that they want to treat you. And that's, finally, I think it's coming up that, PT is now a formidable way for people to get their education.
Mm-hmm.
And to help athletes. Like it's a big deal now. It's not.
Yeah. So there's, I'm starting to see this shift in the field of physical therapy, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
I love to see it. That we're realizing that we are vastly underloading and undertraining our patients. So, for example, the 70-year-old grandmother, grandfather who wants to be able to pick up their 3-year-old,
right,
who weighs, I don't know what a 3-year-old weighs, but I don't know, we'll just say, 20 pounds. I don't know, 35 pounds, I don't know.
You guys will.
Yeah, I don't know. But anyway, they need to pick up their
grandchild.
I don't know either. But if they need to pick up their grandchild, and they're lifting 5-pound dumbbells,
right,
that's not going to carry over.
Right.
So I'm starting to see this shift in physical therapy, which should have happened a long, long time ago, of training to the intensity that they need to be at.
I like that.
So yeah, there's a lot to be said for finding a physical therapist that understands exercise, load tolerance, volume management, mechanics of all of that, and tailor it to you specifically.
Right.
So
it's funny because I had a back injury years ago, and I go to a physical therapist, and I didn't want to go to someone that I knew, because a lot of the times they're like, well, you know how to fix it, you know what to do. And not everything. Like that's above my pay grade. And especially when it comes to my own body,
mm-hmm.
I'm not gonna do what I'm probably supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I see this, I go to this new place, and this gentleman asked, what I did. I hurt myself. Well, when did you do it? And I said, well, I was squatting at the Arnold,
mm-hmm.
and I felt something pop,
mm-hmm.
and I wasn't sure what it was. So he says to me, he's like, well, stand up. Let me see you squat. Maybe you don't know how to squat properly. I was like, are you fucking kidding me? So I was like, okay. And, and I, squatted, and he's like, yeah, blah, blah, blah. And he puts me through all this dumb shit, and I left and ended up fixing it myself. But, but that was aggravating.
Mm-hmm.
Just, number one, to be condescending in that tone. I understood he didn't know who I was, and, I don't know who he was, but, I'm going to him as a professional, like,
mm-hmm.
I need help.
Yeah.
And I think that was something.
Yeah. So I think there's a separate topic about, women in weightlifting and things like that. Yeah. we could go on a rant about that.
Tangent on that.
Yes. But also, same thing that we talked about earlier with the carryover of intensity. You squatting in his office, body weight does not equate to your 400-pound squat.
Right.
Because at a certain point, there may be a breakdown, at, 300 pounds that wasn't there when you're squatting
exactly.
135.
Right.
So that's where it's also beneficial to, again, find a PT clinic that has the equipment to train you for your goals. Thankfully, our clinic also just got a squat rack. So
I know, you're so excited about
I'm so excited.
She
couldn't
wait to text me.
Oh, I know. Yeah. I was so excited because I had my, one of my late 70s patients with Parkinson's doing deadlifts.
Oh, that's so awesome.
It was awesome. I almost cried when I saw it because I was just like, this is what he needs to do. He didn't think he could do it. And he wants to be able to play with his, with his 1.5, 2-year-old, 3-year-old great grandchild.
Right.
So
great grandchild. Wow.
I know. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So there was a lot there. So there's absolutely something to be said for, again, training for the intensity that you're, that you need to be at. So the body weight squats are not going to equate to loading up, especially as an equipped lifter,
Right.
putting on your equipped gear, because now I know better than anyone. I feel like that those mechanics are totally different.
So Casey and I have been together since 2017.
Yeah.
And took her from, bodybuilding figure into raw lifting and now equipped lifting. And I warned her, you would never, you couldn't understand it unless you do it. Like, you have to try it. And now, like, you're like, okay, that's,
yeah,
it's a whole different animal.
It is. The mechanics are different. It feels like a different sport. And I think a lot of people from the outside also feel like, oh, well, you can just throw on equipment and then you can squat an extra 100 pounds. It's
right.
like, no.
So I have a video of her just throwing on equipment and squatting, and she torpedoed out the front.
It was awful.
And I will definitely have to plug that in here somewhere. It was hilarious. I'm like, you okay?
They saved me though. So, I mean, yeah. But, yeah, so mechanics-wise, you also need a PT that, or a rehab specialist that understands
yes,
that aspect of it. Now, there are other athletes, there's other type of athletes, that also come into the clinic. And I don't claim to know everything about every aspect of their sport, but I do know, especially if they are a softball or baseball player, or pitcher, especially, I mean, they could be throwing 75, 80, 90, 90 throws per game at high velocity and high intensity.
right.
So me doing, some overhead work with a band at 10 miles an hour is not going to do much for that, you know? So we need to develop if they're lacking mobility, restore mobility. If they're lacking the strength, improve some of the strength for muscular imbalances, but power development, plyometric development, multiple plane movements, those are all important for every athlete that they should have. So, yeah. And you had said about, going to an outside perspective because, people say, oh, well, you know what to do.
Right.
I've had PT a few times myself now. I just went to my colleague, shout out Chris, because yeah, I generally knew what to do when I herniated a disc in my back. I'm also back to lifting heavier than I was before that, so don't let anyone tell you it's not possible.
Right.
But, I went to someone else because I can't look in the mirror or see what my glutes are looking like or, what my knees are doing when I squat or when I deadlift.
Right.
In that moment, I mean, I might be able to record it and say, oh, I see that. But in the moment, I can't. So it's also
what you're feeling.
Yeah, I know what I'm feeling, and sometimes it's just pain. But at least I can relay that to somebody, and he could say, well, let's adjust your stance in this way because you get a better mechanical advantage this way.
Right. It's all body mechanics.
Yeah. It's a lot of mechanical analysis and then volume management and stuff like that. So
what do you do for the athlete? And I talked about this a little while ago on one of my stories. You're getting ready for a big competition, and it never fails. Something happens and you get hurt, or you have a small injury, or you have a nagging injury. But, you're 4 weeks out from, World Championships or the Arnold or whatever. Mm-hmm. You, in your head, you're going to push through that. Like I know myself, I'm pushing through that. Mm-hmm. What is the best way to do that? Still push through, so you can compete, and without maybe making it worse, which is, I know that's a double-edged sword right there.
Yeah, that can be certainly a double-edged sword. So when it comes to athletes that are in season, we treat them a little bit differently than those out of season. So if at all possible, if you have a history of some kind of injury or there's a pattern to it, 4 weeks out, you're starting to feel that hip pain again because now your loads are getting to that 95%, 100% of what you're capable of. Pain. That's also experience. Yes. That's from my personal experience too. Because I noticed that as I start to go a little bit heavier, like it gets a little bit, but it gets there a little bit, but I can work through some of it.
Right.
So knowing that pattern, I've actually gone to the PT. I've gone to Chris in the off season too, with no goal in mind, with no meet in mind, and I said, hey, let me know what you find. We'll work on this before the season starts to adjust that. So if there's something nagging at you, even if there's that there's nothing nagging now, but there could be later.
But in your what is potentially going to be a problem.
Yeah. Talk to, get a referral for the PT or other rehab specialists, medical personnel that you go to see before it can get to that point.
Right.
So 1, be as proactive as you possibly can. But 2, I would say while you're in season, it's going to depend on the type of injury and what loads and stuff that you're competing at or that you're training at.
Right.
It may be as simple as just reducing some of the volume with it, because like I said many times throughout this, volume is a big piece of it.
Right.
So if you back down the volume a little bit, it'll give whatever's being inflamed or being aggravated a little bit extra time to heal. You can also, in conjunction with what your coach has programmed. I mean, number one, I'd like to change my answer. Tell your coach about it first. Tell your coach about it.
Because honestly, we can make those adjustments for you.
Yeah.
And see, okay, how is this helping?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because then if you don't tell anyone about it and then you're still training at 95%, we can't make adjustments.
Right. It's too late.
Yeah, it's too late for that. So 1, let your coach know so that they can make those volume and program adjustments as necessary. I guess I'd like to change my answer. Step 1. Step 2, then talk to your, rehab professional about what's going on. So in season, you may need to, I guess, like we talked about, just back down the volume a little bit, allow extra time, or if there is a chance that you can make small adjustments in your stance or in your grip to compensate a little bit, you can make those and then to make it feel better.
Just to get through
some of it.
And then go ahead and, hey, now you need to take care of it.
Yeah. See, so this is also the problem with powerlifters, is this exact conversation.
Yes.
Whereas most people would be like, don't compete.
Do it. I know.
don't compete.
You know what? Maybe that's the right answer, but
that's an answer. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's an answer. But I know. I mean, you work so damn hard, and it's just right there.
Yeah.
I'm like, I just got that. Yeah.
Yeah. So it is going to depend on also how much of a problem it is.
Right.
And how much you're also willing to put your body through, because I have an athlete currently that I'm like, listen, I can get you back on the platform sooner rather than later if you want to make this your one and only competition.
So I feel like this is so hard to do, especially when you're in season, in competition mode, to step back and take the 4 to 6 weeks it might be to completely heal, or keep going through, and now you're going to have friggin' 6 months of healing to do. Right.
So that's the other aspect you have to mentally deal with. It could certainly be tough as you put in months and years of work to reach, whatever your goal is, whatever competition you're working towards. But you have to weigh the risk of, is this worth it to a certain extent because, you know, once again, most people want to live to lift another day, you know, you don't. So you have to weigh that. And that's a whole other aspect in relation to like, you know, your mental health and your mental space.
Yeah.
So that plays a huge role in also what you're willing to.
You just like open up Pandora's box with your mental state.
Yeah.
Because that is something that I know this coming in for my world championship, I was mentally in such a bad way. You know, my training was shit. I felt like shit. My body was shit. And it's hard to have that breakdown and to step back,
Mm-hmm.
because that's another thing is if you're not working out,
Mm-hmm.
what are you going to do? Like, how are you going to get those endorphins? Like, it's difficult to.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, how do we?
So this is where alluding kind of back to the beginning of the podcast where we were talking about, you know, what do you do with your time?
Yeah.
So some people need to take a step back also to find the love again for lifting. So,
And I think your husband just did that.
Yeah, he did. So he needed to take a step back to realize, okay, you know, I'm ready to get back on the platform again mentally. Yeah. So if you do want to still get back in the gym, but maybe let's say, you know, there was something that took you away from that competition. Once again, I'm not somebody that's going to say completely rest. I mean, sometimes people mentally need that too.
Right.
You know, sometimes people need like a week, 2 weeks away from the gym, a month away from the gym.
One day we went shopping.
Yeah.
And that was good. Like, that actually does help.
It does. It does. Definitely.
I mean, I don't know if you guys would understand, but, you know, girls, take that day. You need it.
Yeah. So, if you do want to get back into the gym though, and, you know, there was an injury that was bugging you that you had to step back away from the competition, this is coming from the PT mindset too. If you're seeing a PT for said injury, you know, if it's me, I'm not going to stop you from lifting.
Right.
I am going to micromanage a little bit as far as your programming goes, and make sure that your PT also has open communication with your coach as well. But I mean, I want people to continue to lift. We just may need to change the style. We may need to change, you know, from a powerlifting perspective to a bodybuilding style.
That's what I'm doing right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that is first of all, it's so much easier. 3 hours to like 45 minutes. Like, it's enjoyable.
Yeah.
You know, but you definitely need to make those changes for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. On my time away, my PT had me doing Olympic lifts, and I'm like, this is stupid. I hate this. but at the same time,
you're so hard.
I was so gassed after three snatches, and I'm like, oh my God.
So when I went and got my Jim and I at one point had our CrossFit certifications, and I wanted to go get my Olympic level certification.
Mm-hmm.
So of course I said, you have to come with me. Like, I'm not doing this on my own. And you know Jim, like, he is not built for that. And he can muscle anything. He can muscle anything up.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't know. There's like, I want to say there's like 50 or 60 people in the course.
Mm-hmm.
And we had 5 coaches. And one of them was like one of the head coaches of the USA Olympic team.
Oh, okay.
And we're going through the snatch, and we're 6 hours of snatching. And I just Jim is over there, do, and it's pissing me off. And the coaches at one time, all of them surrounded me and were like just picking my lifts apart. It was the one and only time where I was like, I'm going to cry. I'm going to cry in public. I just wanted to like leave. It was awful. So I feel for you on the Olympic lifts.
But, you know, for some people, just stepping away from the sport, but still incorporating movements that are going to be beneficial, you know, when you eventually step back, that's an option too. That's an avenue that you can explore, because I mean, you see a lot of Olympic lifters switching to powerlifting, or powerlifters incorporating Olympic lifts because of that plyometric development, because of the neuromuscular.
I was going to ask you about the plyometrics, and that's something I think should be maybe incorporated into some of the training. But I guess, it's not like, you're not strong, you're not doing anything that shows you're strong.
Well, so yes and no.
Yeah.
It doesn't have that direct carryover.
Yeah.
But the aspects of it, and learning to move your body quickly in certain planes, that will develop. So part of the reason that my PT had me doing overhead squats or snatches is that initial power from the floor,
right,
which can help with deadlifts or with the bottoms up aspect of a squat.
Okay.
So when you're overhead, especially with posture development or owning the bottom of your squat so you're stable and then driving up.
Gotcha.
So that I found was really beneficial in that relation. So yeah, you might not be going really heavy with it, but it's going to help develop the neuromuscular system before you start seeing strength develop. So physiologically, that most people get frustrated when they don't see strength gains right away.
Right.
But you're not going to see strength gains. What's going to happen is those nerves are going to become a lot more efficient at communicating with muscles. And then when they finally decide to do that, then the strength develops. So, and that on average can take like 4 to 8 weeks on some people. So, look at some of the athletes that maybe you've seen transitioning from CrossFit style workouts to powerlifting. They get weaker, but that's because they have to develop that neuromuscular connection first before they can start, before those muscles can start developing power and recruiting more muscle fibers.
Wow. That makes so much sense.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for dumbing it down for me.
You're welcome.
But seriously, that makes a lot of sense, because we actually do have an athlete that crossed over from CrossFit to powerlifting, and she's a little bit on that struggle bus with that.
Yeah. So yeah, it's because she's learning to move her body in different ways that those patterns of movement haven't developed yet. So when those nerves finally make that connection, then the strength comes along, because now you're recruiting your fast twitch fibers more efficiently and faster, versus potentially develop or recruiting other muscle fibers or other areas of the body. So yeah, it's usually a neuromuscular, there's a period of neuromuscular adaptation before the strength can happen.
So you touched on CrossFit athletes. I know when, we probably went that route for about 5 years, and I enjoyed some of it, but I did not enjoy that suck. I did not enjoy, the go until you're ready to pass out or puke or whatever. But what I did notice in a lot of the CrossFit was a lot more injuries. Just unbelievable amount of shoulder injuries and knee injuries. And I don't know if it's because of, getting through, we'll take the pull-ups, for example. Like they have those
the kip ups.
Yeah, the kip ups and the butterflies. And I see a lot of slap tears with those butterfly. So how do you feel about the way they go through those? And I'm not saying it's wrong, but it's injurious.
Yeah. So I will say CrossFit in itself is not inherently dangerous. It's more so the programming, or potentially even depending on what gym or what coaches you have, the mentality around it. So you also have to make sure that you have a coach who understands what your limitations are, because, if you go into, and this is any sport in general, if you have somebody that's just going to push just to get results, but not developing the foundation, then that's the problem. So with some of those newer movements, like the kip ups and things like that, there's ways to build up to it. So you definitely have to work on your this is where the accessory stuff is going to come in. Build up the lats, build up the biceps, especially if it's a slap tear, because your biceps attaches to the labrum in the shoulder. So you have to build up the strength and the power from the biceps too. But modify until you feel like they're ready.
Right.
On top of the actual structure of the program of it. So if you're doing like a ton of compound lifts in one session, and then the following day doing even more compound lifts,
right,
that's going to fry your neuromuscular system, and you're not going to get that recovery either.
Right.
So there's a lot that in the background of CrossFit that it's some aspects of it aren't great. Some of it is, because then you are, it's in the name, cross-training people for other things, right, and other movement patterns, but it's all about how you structure, the movement patterns, the programming, the volume, and what your athlete can tolerate. So I don't really have a great answer for that in particular, but there's a lot of factors that go into it.
I think having coaches that are understanding of exercise, mm-hmm, and how the body moves, mm-hmm, and when to look at an athlete and, not take them apart, but, making sure that they're not going too hard, too heavy, too fast.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's going to take time to develop all of that. Right. So there's some of it, some of it is also we haven't really talked about this a lot, but we've alluded to it, but the nutrition, the sleep, the stuff that you can control.
Right.
So that's a big piece of all of this. Without that simple aspect, you're more injury prone. So,
and I think people forget how nutrition plays a part in being an athlete. Just because you're a power lifter doesn't, and yes, we have weight classes, but I don't ever suggest just eat whatever you want. Just make sure you stay in that weight class. Mm-hmm. Your body is not going to develop well. Your strength isn't going to develop well unless you have the nutrients to support that. Mm-hmm. So if you're not supporting in that way, mm-hmm, you're not going to recover either.
Right. Yeah. If you're not replenishing all of that, then, it's the muscles can't rebuild. Then you're constantly in this catabolic state.
Right.
And it's going to be hard to put on, more pounds to your total, right, or to move as quickly as you want to move,
And you're not going to get bigger by being in the weight room all the time. Mm-hmm. You're just tearing muscle fibers. That's not where you're growing. Mm-hmm. You're growing in your state of rest, mm-hmm, nutrition. That's when you're going to see. Mm-hmm. And I even with bodybuilding, I always find it incredibly fascinating that the both of us always looked bigger the leaner we got.
Yes.
That was just always, people are like, what are you, 140 pounds? Nope.
Yeah. No.
A lot smaller than that, but right, thank you.
Yes. Yeah, it was, and because you're more defined, I think, then people see the muscles and they're like, oh.
Yeah. But it doesn't mean you're necessarily stronger or weaker though.
Right.
Because when you're actually eating for bodybuilding, you're getting all the nutrition that you need. You may be in a caloric deficit, mm-hmm, but I found myself that sometimes I was a lot stronger, mm-hmm, way stronger.
Oh, I agree. I remember, when you had me doing like 8 sets of 8 squats, which now I'd die of a heart attack, or like 10 sets of 10.
Yeah.
But I remember doing 10 sets of 10 at like 155 and 165 like pounds.
Yeah.
And now I'm like hyperventilating thinking of that.
You think maybe we should put that back in?
Oh no.
It would be a lot heavier now.
Oh yeah.
Like a lot heavier.
Yeah.
So how is your training going? You had the opportunity, let's touch a little bit on that. you were on the reserve list to go to Open Worlds,
Mm-hmm.
and unfortunately, you weren't selected, and that's like, oh, that's
I
kind of a heartbreak. Like, I don't know what's worse, being injured and not being able to go, or, you know, being in a good state and your training is going really well, and, you know, you're like,
Yeah.
there's nowhere to show.
I know. Yeah, training's going well. I think next week is the week where we get to test everything out.
Yeah.
Because Lithuania open equipped worlds are happening right now, which definitely would have been cool to go. So I know you had me peaking close to this point. So next week is the week where we get to test everything, and I am excited to see where I'm at, especially after I've only competed in 2 equipped meets so far, and each one, you know, my numbers have gone up. I feel like I'm finally getting more confident in the gear. I trust myself a little bit more.
Yeah, that's more than anything, trusting yourself in it, because you have to know it's those movement patterns, especially in that squat. You've got to get those hips back. If you don't do that, you're going to go.
Yep, like I did.
You look down, you possibly could go down. Like, yeah.
Yeah. So, overall, I mean, I'm feeling good. I'm also, I'm ready to go back to raw for a little bit just to get out of the equipment.
Yeah. And it's hard because, you know, you will lose some raw strength being in the equipment all the time. So you want to make sure, you know, we get you back out of that, you build that raw strength back up, and then start again.
Right.
So let's talk, we didn't get to really talk about you coming back from North Americans. So that was your first international meet with Powerlifting America, and it was in, where the heck was it?
Cayman
Islands.
Yeah.
So unfortunately you were unopposed.
Yeah.
That kind of sucks, but it's also like you have a little bit more freedom to take some chances and you know, hit some PRs. But what did you think of that experience?
It was so much fun. It was a blast. Like you said, unfortunately, I was unopposed. So, so a couple of my friends were asking, like, "Oh, so you're just gonna go real light?" I'm like, "No."
Why would you do that?
Yeah, why would I do that? No, because this is one of those where I'm training. I want to see what I can do.
Yeah.
So it was a blast. The coaches were great. The coach who handled me, Austin Brown, was awesome. And yeah, we still stuck to the plan though. So with or without opponents, I still went through whatever you wanted me to and whatever I felt like I could handle, and I ended up having a 9 for 9 day, which was awesome.
At your first international meet, 9 for 9 day in equipment, like that's check.
And then after that, having one of the Powerlifting America coaches, you know, text me and say, "Oh, you're an alternate for Worlds," I was like,
"You're so cute," and you called me. I know what that experience is like. You're like, "Oh my God, I'm there." You know, you're just there. So now we're just, we're very quiet about what you're doing, because, you know, we don't want everyone to know.
I know.
But, you know, we're going to peak you next week, and then I think it's going to be interesting to see where it goes, you know, coming into next nationals.
Yeah, I agree. I'm excited for it. I again want to keep pushing myself to see what I can do, especially with this being a newer aspect of powerlifting. It's like a new sport for me.
Right.
So, and that keeps it exciting.
Do you think now that Ken, her husband, is back competing, do you think he'll go to nationals?
I'm trying to push him.
Yeah, because that would be fun.
Yeah, I agree. I think, well, one, as the resident PT in that household, I gotta fix him. Yeah. So that's step one.
How does that work? Because I'm sure he's not a great patient, but in his defense, I'm sure you're probably not awesome, you know.
That is also correct.
Yes.
That's probably the bigger aspect of it. So he actually is a pretty good patient when I tell him, when I do tell him what to do.
Because I know with me, and when Jim coaches me, like, oh, he just irritates me, like, and tells me what to do, and I'm like, it's just,
Yeah. So, Yeah, I mean, I hope he does. I think that would be great. I'm even trying to push him back into equipped so we could, suffer together.
Yes. It definitely makes it easier because you know exactly what each other's going through. It's hard. I mean, when you're training for something and you're alone, especially in equipment, you need spotters. I mean, you need people there for you. You need people to actually talk you off the bridge sometimes.
Yep.
That's tough.
And that's why my training schedule has been a little bit different, only because I want to make sure someone's there with me. So because there's no way when I'm the only one at the gym at 6 a.m. am I going to put on one, I can't put on a bench shirt by myself. I need help.
Yeah.
But two, spotters, loaders. I mean, there was, just that one lifter a couple months ago that there was a horrendous injury, which ended up leading to him dying because he had a spotter but didn't know how to spot.
Yeah.
So there's something to be said for, making sure that you are safe with all of this too.
Exactly.
And when you're overloading with equipped especially.
Yes, because anything can go wrong at any time. It's I know my last squat before we left for Mongolia was in, the home gym, and I was by myself and I had to have my squat suit on. And I was like, please, and I videoed it just in case something happened, that there was evidence like of what happened to me.
No.
I was fine. Like it went okay. Everything was fine. But I also have 2 dogs running around. So I'm walking out and Kilo decides to lay down. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to kill myself and the dog in one movement.
Oh no.
So yeah, I mean, I don't think powerlifters are real smart.
Generally, no.
No, I mean, I definitely have not made good choices.
Make good choices.
Oh my God. Oh, let me see if there's anything else you want to talk about. I think I got everything like I wanted to touch on this. Is there anything that you want to...
Well, I know you had mentioned about the pelvic floor in particular.
Oh, yes.
So one of the common things that we've seen in women is peeing while when you lift heavy.
Yes, deadlifting, box jumps, jump roping. It's happened to me, deadlifting.
Mm-hmm. So let me just start out by saying I'm not a pelvic floor specialist, but where I work, I have access to, I think, 2 of the best pelvic therapists I've ever met. So I had talked to them about this too.
Oh, excellent. Okay.
Yeah. So I got some great pointers from them in relation to it. I mean, I see a few lifters every now and then that have that issue. And we work through their bracing strategy, their strength and mobility movements of their hips, especially. So one of the big things that it's common to hear is that it's either a weakness problem when sometimes it's actually not. So one, if you have this problem, you can also see a pelvic PT.
Right. Okay.
However, with women, it's common but not normal. That's important, I think, to differentiate.
Yes, because there's not everybody. There's so many people out there that they say, well, it's normal. You're especially at my age now. Well, you're older, so it's normal.
Right.
No, it's not normal.
Right. Yeah, it's common but not normal. So oftentimes, from what I've talked to my colleagues about, is that one, it may be a bracing issue in that they may be hypertonic. So some people think that it's a weakness issue and like, oh, do Kegels and you'll be fine.
Right.
Sometimes it's not that, because with powerlifters in particular, we're used to bracing everything at once.
Right.
And so if your pelvic floor is hypertonic, meaning that it's tense all the time, I mean, well, you can't tense it anymore than it already is, so something's going to give.
Okay.
So in some cases, it actually may be a hypertonic issue. In that respect, Kegels and strengthening exercises are only going to make it worse.
Gotcha. Okay.
Sometimes, yeah.
This is important shit right here.
So it may be a tension or a pressure management issue. So one of the beginning things that our pelvic floor therapists specifically work on is actually breathing strategies.
Okay.
Because your diaphragm and then your pelvic diaphragm, they work together. And if both are really tense and then you brace, once again, it's just increasing the pressure.
Okay.
So oftentimes what they initially teach are diaphragmatic breathing strategies to help relax the muscle or do visualization to help reduce the tone in the pelvic floor, and then learn to adequately brace. Because with brand new lifters, when we say brace everything, people are tense, right? And so they may actually have learned over time with that neuromuscular adaptation that when they brace, the pelvic floor also tenses significantly, and then they can't control it because they don't know how to relax it afterwards.
Gotcha. Okay.
So there's a lot that can go on with that, and this is where, again, I'm not a pelvic PT, so that it would be beneficial to see or speak to a specialist in that area. But yeah, it's common but not normal. It can be either weakness or a hypertonic issue. So differentiating between the two is important. And breathing strategies, very helpful for a lot of that. There is, and actually one of my pelvic PTs said to mention this too. She goes, it happens to women, right? With peeing on the platform. But, and this is something that TMI, men can have those rectal prolapses.
Really?
Yeah. Because of the same kind of issue, because of the pelvic floor issue. So if someone has literally blown out a rectum because of lifting heavy, there's a pelvic floor issue.
That's what it's from.
It can be.
Can
be.
Okay. Do we really want to talk? Yeah, let's talk about it. We're in it. We're already in it. So what do they do? Because maybe there's some dude out there that's like, oh man, I have a situation.
Yeah. So, see a pelvic PT.
It seems like it's almost embarrassing to have to go and do. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why nobody goes and they don't seek help.
Right. And a lot of people
they'll just
don't
buy
even
the period panties.
Yes. So a lot of times they don't even realize that help is out there for something like this. So help is definitely out there with physical therapy, you can talk to your OBGYN, but there is also a limited knowledge from other providers on stuff like this as well. This is very similar to can be very similar to the, back pain, don't deadlift.
Right.
Or just wear the period panties.
Yeah.
So there is help with pelvic PT for urinating, with exertion or with plyometric activities.
Sneezing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. As well as with, for men too. So for some of the rectal issues or for other issues, pelvic PT can actually help with some of that. But it's not often talked about because it can be embarrassing.
Right.
Other healthcare providers don't realize that physical therapy can help with something like that, other than just don't do it.
Right. Is it the same? Would it be the same as when the guys are squatting and shitting themselves? Is it the same there? Or is that they're not braced? They're bracing the wrong way. I'm assuming.
So that is a possibility. I can't answer that directly as not being a specialist with that. However, if it happens a lot, actually, that's something that on the men's health side isn't necessarily talked about either.
Not at all. Or they think it's funny.
Yes.
You guys just laugh and because we're like, that doesn't, I've that doesn't happen to me. I'll pee on the platform, but I'm not going to shit myself.
Yes.
Knock on wood.
Right. Yeah. Knock on wood that doesn't happen. So yeah, that part's not talked about either as much.
We're joking about it, but this is serious. This could be serious.
Absolutely. And with the, with the push for women in strength sports, I've seen a lot of misconceptions, misunderstanding when that happens to women. It's, again, embarrassing. People, don't understand what's going on.
Well, plus as another woman, you want to immediately be like, hey, it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Like, don't think anything about it.
Right.
And you want to make them feel better. Like, you're not the only one it's happening to.
Mm-hmm.
But we also don't want to, like, sweep it under the rug. Like, we don't talk about it.
Right. Yeah. So there are options. It may be, again, there's a couple things that could be going on, whether it be a tension, bracing, breathing issue that could be contributing to it. It's not always, the answer is not always Kegels.
Right.
So that's the big thing with this. The answer is not always Kegels.
But that was always the answer.
Mm-hmm.
There. And I've never even heard of a pelvic floor specialist till the last couple of years. Is that something like new?
No, so there have always been pelvic specialists, although traditionally they were always thought of as women's health specialists. So we're moving away from that to include men, other genders, things like that, to address those issues. Because as we talked about, that prolapse or pooping themselves,
yeah.
That's not just a women's issue. Men can benefit from some of those bracing strategies in pelvic health as well.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
There's hope.
Yes.
There's absolute hope.
Yes.
And I do think, it's funny because, when it's happened to me, I am very much more aware where I'm at when I deadlift and where my hips are and where I'm bracing and with or without the belts. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it definitely... you can feel,
Mm-hmm.
what you need to do.
Yeah. And on top of the bracing and breathing, there are muscles that attach, not just the pelvic floor diaphragm, which is made up of a few layers of muscle, but some of your hip muscles, like your obturator internus and externus muscles, they attach very close to the pelvic floor. So they sometimes can either be too tight, not allowing you to externally rotate or internally rotate the way that you're supposed to be positioned.
Right.
Therefore, then increasing the tension on that area too.
That makes sense.
Yeah, there's a lot that can go on that,
So if you have tight hips,
Mm-hmm.
What would be something that you could do for, to start bringing that into your mobility?
Yeah. So one of the really great exercises that I enjoy using are the hip 90-90s. So that one we can film and link to it.
Okay.
Where you're sitting half on an internal rotation, half on an external rotation, and then you just flip your legs from side to side.
I've seen you do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I
that
actually see her do her warm-ups. She actually does them.
I try to practice what I preach.
Yeah, she does.
So that is a great one. And then you can even then progress that to gluteal activation exercises by doing that hip 90-90 and then going into a kneeling position and then flipping sides and going up into a kneeling position. So there's progressions to that one. That one I really like doing.
Okay.
So, and again, depends on what you have going on. It's just a general.
But it could be helpful regardless.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
We're gonna do a lot of fun videos, and I'll make sure that I post your video of your little fallout.
So great.
Well, because I think people need to see, and I have a video. So back in, I don't know what year. I don't even want to talk about what year because it was a long freaking time ago. But I tore my ACL squatting.
I remember seeing that video.
Yeah, and I'll post a video, but if you don't just scroll right by it because some people it's upsetting. But I went and I had an X-ray done, and they sent me to see orthopedic specialist, and he said I had a 50% tear, and he was like, "Listen, we can do surgery, or we can do PT." PT.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I don't remember if it was 6 or 8 weeks, but 6 to 8 weeks of like serious PT. And they did another film, and Doc said he couldn't even tell where it was torn. So it does work. It can help you. Yes. Did I have all those weeks off where I still lifted? You know, you still can do upper body. You can still do single leg movements.
Yeah.
I still squatted. I was not allowed to go past 90 degrees, like no open chain movements, but you know, it wasn't the end of the world.
Right.
And then I came back, you know, better.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Especially because again, you were still able to lift.
Yes.
And, you know, add load to that tissue, because once again, bringing it back to earlier in the conversation, you know, if you're doing 10-pound squats or body weight squats, it's not going to correlate to, you know, when your goal is over 400 pounds.
Well, and I think that, you know, people get hurt or they're like, oh, I'm going to take some time off. Well, then they don't come back. Some people just don't come back.
Yeah.
So, of course, like maybe their injury is, you know, resolved, but then they've missed out on the opportunity to, you know, to be better for themselves.
Yeah. So, but there's a lot of stuff that happens with that too. You know, as we talked a little bit about the mental state,
Right.
You know, the information that's available and degree of injury, all that definitely plays a role. But I mean,
Now that we've talked about, you know, physical therapy, how does someone find a physical therapist that's right for them, like a powerlifter or a CrossFitter, like an athlete, you know, to go and you know, how do you know it's the right person for you?
ooh, that's a good one, because we don't really have a database to search. But I mean, for some health networks in general, they'll have your bios in there. You could see where certain therapists, you know, participate in certain activities, or if they, you know, enjoy treating certain populations.
Right. Because you are well versed in multiple sports. You know, we've worked together for a long time. Like I trust you. Like I always make sure that see Casey. Casey.
Yeah.
You know, and which is nice when we're also in competition and you're there. You know, you always make sure to take care of the athletes. But you know, there's some people that are very good with geriatric patients and maybe not so good with an athlete. And, you know, I want to, you know, you want to make sure you get you and not that one.
Yeah.
Not that they're
no,
bad at what
get
they
what
do,
you're saying.
but they maybe they can't relate.
Right. So, yeah, the evaluation is as much an interview for the patient as it is for the PT. So if you are, as the patient, you know, not feeling comfortable, you know, you can ask them, what is your experience with, you know, with powerlifting or lifting in general?
You know, you hate to be disrespectful like that too.
Honestly, I don't take that as a slight if somebody asks me what's your experience with it, because I want them to, the way that I have adapted my practice is I want them to get the best care possible. So the patient has a lot of power, and more power than they realize. And I like to let them know that too, where they need to be an advocate in this healthcare world as much for themselves too, as much as we can be for them. So that evaluation, once you get set up, is as much of an interview as they're getting your history, but you can ask them, you know, straight up, what is your experience with this? Because your outcomes are likely going to be better from someone that understands the sport intimately. Right. Even if you don't have someone who participates in it, understands that the load and volume management and proper dosing of exercise is one of the most important things for the athlete, you know, then you know you're in the right spot. Right. So I don't really have a great answer because we don't have a database of PTs. I kind of wish we did. That would be great. Yeah. But the patient has the power to ask those questions too. Right. So something that's not often talked about, I think, is, you know, they tell you, okay, go here, go here, go here. Yeah. You know, and then we go through our evaluations and then you're set up and, you know, no, the patient has a lot of power, or should have a lot of power as well, to choose, if they're comfortable, if they're not comfortable, and to bring that to the attention of the PT and say, hey, this is not, I need more.
Right.
So.
And honestly, the patient does have that power, and they need, but on that flip side, when the PT gives you homework,
do it.
Do the homework.
Do it. Yeah.
Like
PT doesn't work unless you do.
Yeah.
So.
I did the homework and it worked out. Like do the homework. It's not that freaking hard.
Correct. Yes. Do the homework. That is also star. Do the exercises that we give you.
All right. So I don't know. We've been here a while.
Yeah, we have.
So let's do some quick rapid fire questions.
Okay.
Which I didn't think about these at all, so
oh gosh,
it might not be as rapid fire as I would like them to be. But so raw or equipped?
Oh, equipped.
Really?
Yeah. Bodybuilding
or powerlifting?
I really like powerlifting because it's objective. So I like the objective aspect of it. I've done subjective sports all my life with gymnastics and diving. So being in a sport that somebody says you lifted heavier than this person, you win, is great.
Yeah, that's true. It's not like, well, I don't know if they're symmetrical.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Favorite exercise?
Bench.
Obviously. I don't want to say it. It's ridiculous is what it is. I think what we should do is, I think we should have a competition and like have 3 girls and like you have the best bench, you bench for me, I'll squat for you, and then have someone else.
So we're going to have like a relay with powerlifting.
Freaking amazing.
Oh, like a super total. That'd be fun.
Yeah, it would.
That would be fun.
Yeah, we should do that.
Okay. Sounds good. Sounds good. You're on my team for squat.
We're totally doing this. Yes. Red or white wine?
Ooh, more recently red.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Sweet or
kind of in the middle.
Yeah.
Kind of in the middle. Although I'm starting to lean towards dry. Being in Italy and Greece over the last couple of years has spoiled me with those red wines. Yeah. So.
I know when we went to France, first of all, you can get a $4 bottle of wine and it's amazing.
Yeah, I'm really liking the reds now.
So what did you like more, Greece or Italy?
Italy.
Really?
Yeah. There were aspects of Greece that I loved. Santorini was beautiful. Athens and seeing all of the Greek things associated with Greek mythology, amazing. Italy was just nonstop beauty everywhere that we went. Yeah. So, yeah.
You would go back?
I would go back.
What's your favorite, your one place, like your bucket list place that you would like to see?
Switzerland.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, Switzerland. Just the mountains, the valleys,
Do you ski at all?
No.
Do you want to go in the winter?
No.
Okay. So are you beach or mountains?
Mountains.
Ice cream or cake?
Ooh. Cake.
Chocolate or vanilla?
Vanilla.
Let me think. Really?
What?
Vanilla?
Yes.
That's just like, what is with girls and vanilla? I'm like chocolate 100% all the way. Now we can't be friends. Like, that's weird. You and Leah are like gone now. No. I appreciate you doing this with me. This was a lot of fun.
Thanks for having me.
I think a lot of the stuff that we touched on, I hope it can help some people. And, we'll shoot the link for the videos that we're going to do. And if you guys have any questions, please feel free to message me, or you can find Casey on her Instagram. What is her Instagram?
CJ Hill 4.
Yeah, 4.
Yeah.
Just what's cool for what?
That was my favorite number growing up. I don't know.
4?
4. Yeah, that was my number for softball.
Oh, okay.
That was my cousin's number. I don't know. It's my lucky number.
So if you have any questions, hit us up. But until then, thank you. Bye. That was awesome.
That was fun.
Thank you.
Of course.